I find it interesting. I like both of these people, so I'm going to be as fair as I can be and as honest. So there's a white South African fighter. His name is Dricus du Plessis, and he's from South Africa. I think born and raised. He still lives there. And then there's other African fighters like Kamaru Usman and the guy I just showed you, Israel Adesanya, who were born in Nigeria, but Israel Adesanya went to New Zealand, and Kamaru Usman, I think, went to the United States. And the white South African basically said, I'm the real African. You know, I wake up in Africa, I eat, sleep, breathe Africa, so there has never been an African champion. If I win the belt, I'll be the first African champion, essentially. Let's take a listen to his, his speech. And there's a reason I'm playing this besides what I just said.
Or do you see this as an opportunity? Now you do get to be the guy if and when they show up to Africa.
Well, I mean, did those belts ever go to Africa? As far as I know, it came to America and New Zealand. I'm going to take a belt to Africa. I'm the African fighter in the UFC. Myself and Cameron, we breathe the African air. We wake up in Africa every day. We train in Africa. We're African born. We're African raised. We still reside in Africa. We train out of Africa. That's an African champion, and that's who I'll be.
It's a huge jab, metaphorically, to Kamaru Usman and Israel Adesanya, who are, consider themselves African to a certain extent, even though they moved, to be like, no, I'm the only African, really. It's like, I'm out here living in Africa. If I win the belt, I'll take it to Africa. And this kind of strikes the conversation is, what does it mean to be African? What does it mean to be European? Is it moving there? If you're black and you live in Paris and you've been there for 5 years, are you more French than the guy whose family's been there for 400 years, but he moves to America? Same with China. And that's what Kamaru Usman says. He's like, if I move to China, am I more Chinese than the Chinese people? It's an interesting combo, but let's listen to the rebuttal from Kamaru Usman. I'll see some of your comments, and then I'll say my piece, because it's a fascinating race versus nation convo that spreads way further than mixed martial arts.
Did you see Dricus? Did you hear Dricus du Plessis, that's a difficult name to pronounce, his comments about being the African fighter in the UFC?
Oh, I actually saw that. I think it's this week or last week. My one of my former teammates sent it to me. They're trying to be messy, of course. I saw it, and the thing about me is just I try not to be quick to jump on someone and really kill them for those things. I'm not part of this cancel culture, but though I understand what he's trying to say. But the one thing that I think he's failing to realize is, just because I go to China and my parents are in China and I'm raised in China, that doesn't make me more Chinese than the people from China. That doesn't make me more Chinese. And so just because you went over to South Africa and you were raised there, that doesn't make you African. So, I would say to him, it's just, try to be a little bit more careful with what you say and how you say it. Because, that's the thing nowadays is these younger guys and these newer guys that get up here and they just talk. They just, because they want to appeal to the fans, appeal to the people. But try to be more mindful, because 20 years from now, that's not going to age well.
And I know you said you like to take stock of things and you don't jump on them straight away, but what was your initial reaction after hearing that? Because it's quite jarring.
It was funny because I've actually trained with the guy. So it's like, bruh, you know how I get down. If it's one of those type of situations, you know how I get down. But, it was never, it's nothing like that. It's after, that first immediate, like, hey, are you serious? Because it sounded personal. Well, because he took direct shots. He mentioned, myself and Israel Adesanya, I believe. And it was like, bro, I actually kind of know you. And so, I think it was just, heat of the moment. He got up there, he's excited, he just got a big win, and he was just running off. But at the end of the day, the wiser side of me is like, okay, I understand what he was trying to say, but bro, that doesn't make you more African.
Thank you.
So that's kind of the dynamic. And I think this conversation is being had all over the place, not just between them. What is a nation, right? Let's start with South Africa. There's a lot of racial tension there. There's racial tension all over the world. In some places, there's really not that much. But in general, South Africa, has had its white versus black, racial tension to some extent. The white South African farmers, etc. But at the same time, how long have those people been there? How long have they been on the land? I'm not 100% familiar with the history, but a lot of people feel like Kamaru Usman. I like both of them, by the way, as fighters, as people. I think they're both dope. If you think that being African is a nation and has nothing to do with race, it's just living there and growing up there, then Dricus du Plessis is right. He was born and raised there. He's still there. He's going to bring the belt back there. That would make it more African. If you believe that a nation is more about race than ethnicity, then Kamaru Usman's right. People were saying in the comments that they don't think his China example was good. I think it was great. You don't have to believe it if you think that being African is a nation, but it's really a perfect example, because say you were Chinese, right? And you move to America and you're American now. You're still always Chinese because Chinese is your race, where if you're white and you're born and raised in China, are you more Chinese? Well, I guess, yeah, if you think Chinese is a nation, but if you see it more as a race, then you're really not. And if you're white in China, you're always going to stick out a little bit. It doesn't mean you can't live there. It doesn't mean nobody's going to like you, but the nation of China is like 90-something% Chinese racially, and they're not trying to change that. They'll let you come over. You could be an immigrant. You could play basketball there, but they're not trying to change their demographics. They're China. They take pride in their race. Europe is an interesting one because Europe is shifting demographics very quickly. A lot of people go to Paris and they say Paris isn't Paris anymore. It's dirty. There's a bunch of homeless there. There's so many refugees and trash everywhere, and it doesn't feel like Paris. Well, why? I mean, France has nothing to do with culture, right? It just has to do with whoever lives there. This is where I feel like there's truth to what they're both saying. At the end of the day, a nation is a nation. It's where you're from. It's who you are. But there is a such thing as culture and race, and I think this is something that conservatives don't really understand yet, or maybe it's too edgy to talk about, or maybe they just want to be like, who cares? Because at the end of the day, on a personal level, yeah, who cares? Just treat everybody like a good person. I don't discriminate based on race in my personal life when it comes to people. It's just like, no, if you're a good person, I like you. If you're not, I don't like you just because you're the same color as me or the same ethnicity. If you're a piece of trash person with my ethnicity, I don't want to talk to you. And if you're a good person of another ethnicity, I do want to be friends with you. So that's how I operate in my personal life. But the truth is, it does also matter on a national scale, which nobody really wants to address. Let me give you an example. I don't care if you're from Nigeria or France, but France is like French and white for the most part, and Nigeria is mostly black. It doesn't mean you can't be white from Nigeria, and it doesn't mean you can't be black in France. But the truth is, if you switch the populations and bring 99% black people to France, the culture is going to change. And the oui, the thing that everybody goes to France for, oh, I want to eat the bread and the baguettes, it's going to change because it's not everybody's culture. It's just the truth. You bring a lot of Hispanics in an area, there starts to be burritos popping up. Muslims take over Dearborn, the food starts turning into Middle Eastern stuff. The place is going to change based on the race of the people there. So it's already starting to shift in a lot of places in Europe, and people say, well, it doesn't matter. It's just a place. It kind of does matter, because it's not going to be the same place if the people shift. So I see both sides of their argument. On one hand, I think Dricus du Plessis is right. He's more African. He lives in South Africa. He's born and raised there. He really is African, and more African than someone's not. On one hand, I'm not even trying to play the fence, but I do see both sides of the argument. I get what Kamaru Usman is saying, where it's like, if you drop him off in China and he's born and raised in China, are you going to look at Kamaru Usman and say, oh, he's Chinese? You probably never will, because he's super black and everybody in China is Chinese racially, so he's never quite going to be Chinese. This is just a conversation I'm having and bringing out to the open, because a lot of people have it behind closed doors, and it's something that it's not easy to have. And also, Americans, I think, are, I wouldn't say naive to it, but it's like America's like a great melting pot or whatever they try to call it. And it's like everybody's from somewhere. It's a newer nation. It hasn't been around for a long time. But the truth, in my opinion, is your country, your state, your city, your community, it's a net sum of the people there. And if the net sum of the people there changes in any sort of way, your culture is going to change, your country's going to change, your nation's going to change, your laws are going to change. That's just the reality of it. So, I don't mind having these conversations because I'm not hateful about it, but I think they both have a point. And I think a lot of people want to say that Kamaru's wrong, because he's not really living in Africa, which is true if you see it as a nation. But, you know, every nation will change just like they all have historically. Every empire falls, every empire changes. It's not like, you know, the same people that ran the world 500 years ago and, you know, it's like the same exact country. Things have changed. America's new, etc. Something to talk about, you know, because I see it. People are like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's like, well, London in 100 years isn't going to be like, you're not going to go to London to be like, oh, there's a bunch of white people in pubs and like, you know, soccer games. Like maybe they'll still like soccer, but some things are going to change. It's not going to be what you thought of England. Like when you thought of England 1950s, you're thinking of a certain thing. England, Italy, Germany, China, Japan. What if you went to Japan and there's no Japanese people there? It's all like white people. Is that still Japan? I mean, maybe technically. You get what I'm saying? It just is. It's not a hateful thing. It's just reality. It's like, oh, I'm in South Korea and there's a bunch of like Indians here. It's all Indians. Like, why? I don't know. They just had a lot of immigration and all the South Korean people got displaced or something. And now it's like, you think it's going to be the same South Korea as it was 80? Of course it's not. So, you know, I think everybody has a right to have this conversation and everybody has a right to really think about it, because whether you think about it or not, it's happening. And when things change, things are going to change for you. And whether you want it or not, it will happen. It is happening. So, you know, something to really just have a combo about. But, you know, is what it is. I thought it was an interesting back and forth. Here's what I want to play this clip real quick before I move on. This is Usman talking about, you know, I'm going to go to London, and he mentions about how the demographics are changing. He's like, is it really an away game for me? He's like, half of it's Nigerian. Take a watch.
You're entering enemy territory to try reclaim the welterweight title.
Am I?
I know there's a big Nigerian
This is London. They love me here. And it's half Nigeria. I'm home.
Well, are you relishing silencing those fans that will be booing you on Saturday night?
Boos or cheers, doesn't matter. I don't pay attention to the crowd. I never really did.
I just thought it was funny. They were like, you know, you're gonna be fighting in England. It's away territory. He's like, is it though?